The alarm bells rang through every corner of the Galactic Council station. Emergency lights flashed red in the Great Assembly Hall, where representatives from 47 different worlds sat around a massive circular table. The air itself seemed heavy with fear. Ambassador Clix of the Zephyrian Collective stood at the center podium, her silver skin reflecting the warning lights. Her voice carried through the hall with mechanical precision. Council members, our deep space sensors have confirmed the worst. The Devourers are coming. A wave of nervous chatter swept through the assembly. Some delegates leaned forward in their chairs. Others whispered urgent messages into their communication devices. The insectoid hive queen clicked her mandibles in distress, while the crystal-based shard people chimed in harmonious fear. "How long do we have?" asked War Marshal Thex, the massive Cathara warrior whose red armor gleamed under the lights. His people were born for battle. And even he looked worried. 6 standard weeks, Clix replied. Maybe 7, if they stop to consume the outer rim systems. The ethereal representative, a being of pure energy contained in a shimmering form, spoke in a voice like wind through crystal caves. "We have faced many threats before, but never anything like this. The Devourers consumed the Andromeda Galaxy in less than 50 years. They turn entire worlds into fuel for their ships." War Marshal Thex slammed his armored fist on the table. "Then we fight them with everything we have. The Kithara Empire will send 2,000 battlecruisers and 50 dreadnoughts." The Zephyrian Collective nodded their approval. "Our automated fleets number in the tens of thousands. Every ship equipped with our most advanced artificial intelligence systems." Other species began announcing their contributions. The Hive Queen promised 1,000,000 small fighters that moved like one mind. The Crystalline Confederation offered their powerful energy weapons. Even the peaceful plant-based Bloom worlds agreed to provide medical support ships. Ambassador Chen of Earth sat quietly through all these announcements. He was a small man by human standards, wearing a simple blue uniform that looked plain compared to the exotic clothing and natural forms around him. His dark eyes watched every speaker carefully, but he said nothing. Finally, the ethereal turned its attention to him. "Ambassador Chen, what forces will humanity contribute to our defense?" The hall grew quiet. Earth was the newest member of the Galactic Council, having joined only 5 years ago. Most species still saw humans as primitive newcomers who had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. Chen stood slowly and cleared his throat. "Earth will send 1 ship." The silence that followed was so complete that the hum of the station's life support systems became clearly audible. Then the noise began. Angry voices rose from every direction. "1 ship? War Marshal," Thex's voice boomed over the others. "My people send scout patrols in groups of 12. The Hive Queen's clicking grew rapid and sharp. "Even our smallest battle swarms contain 100 vessels." Ambassador Chen raised his hand for quiet. The gesture was small, but something in his calm manner made the room settle down. "Yes, 1 ship. That is Earth's contribution." The Zephyrian Collective's mechanical voice cut through the remaining murmur. "Our calculations show that 1 human ship represents approximately 0.003% of our combined fleet strength. This contribution is statistically meaningless." Several delegates nodded in agreement. Some looked angry, others disappointed. A few seemed to think the humans were making a joke. "Is this some kind of insult?" demanded the representative from the Molten Worlds, his rock-like face glowing with heat. "Do humans think this threat is not serious?" Chen shook his head. "We take this threat very seriously. More seriously than you might imagine. But Earth will send exactly 1 ship." War Marshal Thex leaned back in his chair, his red eyes fixed on the human ambassador. "What could 1 ship do against millions of Devourer vessels? Are your people cowards, or do they simply not understand what we face?" "Neither," Chen replied. His voice stayed calm even as the tension in the room grew thicker. "We understand perfectly. That's why we're sending the ship we're sending." The ethereal representative studied Chen with senses that went beyond physical sight. "There is something you are not telling us, human. We sense great confidence in you, but also something else." Something vast and determined. Chen smiled for the first time during the meeting. It was not a happy smile. You'll understand when you see it, the Bloomworld representative spoke in their musical voice. When will this ship arrive? We must coordinate our defenses. When? When it's needed, Chen said. Not before. More angry voices rose. Several delegates accused humans of being unreliable. Others suggested that Earth should be removed from the Council for refusing to take their responsibilities seriously. Through it all, Chen remained standing calmly at his place. Finally, he raised his voice just enough to be heard over the arguments. Council members, you have heard Earth's answer. We will send one ship when the time comes. I suggest you focus on preparing your own forces. He sat down and said nothing more. Even when other delegates demanded explanations or made threats about humanity's future in the Council, the meeting continued for 3 more hours as species after species finalized their military contributions. Battle plans were drawn up, supply lines were established, communication protocols were agreed upon. Throughout all of this, Chen sat quietly in his chair, occasionally making notes but never speaking. Other delegates shot angry or confused glances his way, but he seemed perfectly at ease. As the session ended, War Marshal Thex approached Chen's chair. Human, I have fought in 47 major battles. I have seen courage, and I have seen cowardice. What I have not seen is stupidity disguised as confidence. Which are you showing us today? Chen looked up at the towering warrior. Marshal, you'll have your answer soon enough. When you do, I think you'll understand why one ship is all we need. Thex snorted and walked away. But the ethereal representative lingered. Ambassador, we sense something in your thoughts. Something large and patient and the energy being paused. Something that has been preparing for a very long time. Chen's smile returned, and this time it reached his eyes. Prime consciousness. Some preparations take longer than others. Some preparations take everything you have. With that cryptic answer, Chen gathered his papers and left the assembly hall, leaving behind a room full of confused and worried aliens who had no idea what humanity was planning. The countdown to invasion had begun, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, ancient hungry things moved toward the galaxy with endless appetite and malevolent purpose. The Kepler 442 system had never seen so many ships. What had once been empty space now crawled with vessels from across the galaxy. The combined fleet stretched for millions of kilometers in every direction, a metal forest of death and determination. Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Kethera Dreadnought Times Iron Will Asterisk. Through the massive viewing screen, she could see ships of every shape and design imaginable. Sleek Zephyrian cruisers moved in perfect geometric formations, their hulls gleaming silver in the light of Kepler 442's twin stars. Each ship was exactly identical, built by machines for machines to operate. Closer to the system's edge, the Hive Queen's fighters swarmed like angry insects. Millions of small craft moved as one mind, creating patterns too complex for individual pilots to maintain. They flowed around larger ships like water around stones, never colliding, never breaking formation. The ethereal vessels were harder to see. They existed partly in normal space and partly in dimensions that other species couldn't fully understand. When the light hit them right, they looked like enormous crystals floating in the void. When it didn't, they seemed to fade away entirely. Status report. Admiral Vex commanded her bridge crew. Lieutenant Graal consulted his displays. 4,612 ships, confirmed in position. Admiral. All major species accounted for. Except the humans, Vex finished. The word came out like a curse. It had been 2 weeks since the council meeting, and every other species had delivered exactly what they promised. The Molten Worlds had brought their armored battle fortresses, each one the size of a small city. The Bloom Worlds had positioned their hospital ships safely behind the main fleet. Even the mysterious Shadow Collective had emerged from their hidden bases with ships that seemed to absorb light itself. But from humanity, nothing. Not even a communication explaining their delay. Sir, called Communications Officer Thrall from his station. War Marshal Thex is requesting another conference with fleet commanders. Vex sighed. Put him through. The holographic projector flickered to life, showing the images of commanders from every major fleet. War Marshal Thex's red armor made him easy to spot, but Vex's eyes were drawn to the empty space where Ambassador Chen should have been. Fellow warriors, Vex began without ceremony. The humans are making fools of us all. Commander Zilks of the Zephyrian Collective spoke in her mechanical voice. Our calculations show the Devourers will arrive in 19.4 days. Human participation was included in all strategic planning models. Where are they? Demanded Admiral Corks of the Crystal Confederation. Her crystalline body chimed with irritation. Every hour they delay weakens our defensive positions. The ethereal prime consciousness appeared as a shimmering outline among the other commanders. We have tried to reach Earth through psychic channels. Their minds are unusually shielded, but we sense great activity in their solar system. War Marshal Thex slammed his fist down on something off-screen. What kind of activity? Massive energy expenditures. Construction on a scale we have never observed. Something is happening there, but we cannot determine what. Admiral Vex leaned forward. Prime consciousness. Could they be building some kind of weapon? Unknown. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Commander Zilks's image flickered as her electronic brain processed possibilities. If humans are constructing a super weapon, why not inform the fleet? Coordination would increase effectiveness by 47%. Because they're playing games with us, Thex growled. Or they've decided to run and hide while the rest of us fight their battles. The meeting continued for an hour, but reached no conclusions. The commanders agreed to maintain their positions and wait, but frustration filled every ship in the fleet. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected something approaching from the direction of Earth's solar system. The detection sent waves of excitement through the fleet. Finally, humanity's contribution was arriving. But the sensor readings made no sense. Chief Sensor Technician Moral stared at his displays with confusion. Admiral, I'm reading one object, but the size estimates keep changing. Admiral Vex hurried to the sensor station. Show me. The main screen lit up with a tactical display. A single dot moved slowly toward their position. But the numbers next to it kept jumping around. First it showed the size of a large cruiser, then a battleship, then something much bigger. The computers can't get a fix, Mistral explained. It's like the object is too big for our sensors to understand. That's impossible, Vex said. Our sensors can track objects up to planetary size. Mistral's face went pale. Admiral, what if it is planetary size? Across the fleet, similar conversations were taking place on every ship. Sensor operators argued with their equipment. Science officers checked and rechecked their calculations. Computer systems struggled to process readings that seemed to violate their programming. The Zephyrian Collective tried to solve the problem with logic. They sent probe ships toward the approaching object, but the probes only made the readings more confusing. According to their data, something impossible was heading their way. The ethereal representatives gathered in psychic conference. Even their advanced senses couldn't penetrate whatever was approaching. They could feel its presence growing stronger. But its nature remained hidden. War Marshal Thex paced his bridge like a caged animal. Where is Ambassador Chen? Why won't they answer our communications? His communications officer looked nervous. Sir, we've tried every frequency. Either their ship has no radio, or what? Or they're ignoring us on purpose. On the bridge of the Times Ironwill asterisk, Admiral Vex watched the sensor readings grow more impossible by the hour. The object was definitely getting closer. But it seemed to be breaking every law of physics she knew. Admiral, called Lieutenant Growl, you need to see this. A new display showed gravitational readings from the fleet's edge. The ships positioned furthest out were reporting strange effects on their navigation systems. Something with significant mass is approaching, Growl explained. The gravitational effects are subtle, but they're definitely there. Vex studied the readings. Only one thing could cause gravitational effects at this distance, and still be controlled enough to fly through space. But the idea was so impossible that she didn't want to think it. How much mass? she asked quietly. Growl checked his calculations twice before answering, Admiral. If these readings are correct, approximately 7.3 times 10 to the 22nd kilograms, the bridge fell silent. Every officer who heard the number understood what it meant. That much mass could only come from one source. That's impossible, whispered Navigation Officer Kelm. That's the mass of a moon, Vex finished. She stood frozen for a moment, then activated fleet communications. All ships, this is Admiral Vex. Prepare for the impossible. The humans are coming, and they're bringing something that shouldn't be able to fly. Across the fleet, warnings went out in dozens of languages. Ship captains checked their weapons systems and strengthened their shields. Everyone knew that humans were unpredictable, but nothing had prepared them for this. In the emptiness between stars, something vast and impossible continued its approach. Soon, the waiting would be over. Soon, everyone would understand why humanity had promised only one ship. Soon, they would see that sometimes one ship was more than enough. The first visual contact came without warning. One moment, the long-range cameras showed empty space, and the next moment, they showed something that broke every understanding of what was possible. Senior Technician Kral of the Zephyrian Observation Ship Times Logical Conclusion Times stared at his screen in complete confusion. His artificial intelligence systems were sending error messages faster than he could read them. Every computer on his ship was trying to process what they were seeing and failing. Computer, identify the object, he commanded, unable to comply. Object does not match any known vessel classification. Computer, estimate object size. Unable to comply. Object appears to be larger than maximum vessel parameters. Kral switched to manual observation and immediately understood why his computers were confused. What he was looking at couldn't be a ship. Ships didn't have craters. Ships didn't have gray, dusty surfaces marked with ancient impact scars. Ships weren't shaped like perfect spheres. Ships weren't moons. This is Time's logical conclusion, Times to Fleet Command, Kral transmitted, his mechanical voice carrying an unusual tremor. Visual contact established with human contribution. Request immediate analysis support. We do not understand what we are seeing. Across the fleet, similar reports flooded the communication networks. Ship after ship confirmed visual contact, and ship after ship reported the same impossible readings. On the bridge of the Times Iron Will asterisk, Admiral Vex stared at the main display in stunned silence. Her tactical officer had projected the visual feed onto the largest screen. But even seeing it directly, she couldn't make her mind accept what was in front of her. Earth's moon hung in space before them, scarred and ancient as it had always been. But massive engines the size of continents had been built into its surface. Exhaust plumes larger than most planets stretched behind it in brilliant streams of blue and white. The familiar gray sphere that every species had observed through telescopes was somehow flying through space under its own power. Tactical analysis, Vex commanded, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. Lieutenant Gral's hands shook as he worked his controls. Admiral, the object appears to be Luna, Earth's natural satellite. But it has been extensively modified. The engines alone are larger than our entire fleet. That's impossible, said Navigation Officer Kelm. You can't move a moon. The energy requirements alone would. He trailed off as new readings appeared on his screen. The power outputs they were detecting went beyond anything they had imagined possible. War Marshal Thex's voice boomed across fleet communications. What kind of madness is this? How did they move an entire moon? The ethereal prime consciousness spoke for the first time in hours, its psychic voice reaching every ship simultaneously. We understand now why we could not read their intentions. This project is so vast that we mistook it for a natural phenomenon. Commander Zilks of the Zephyrian Collective processed the visual data through every analytical program in her database. Calculation complete. The modifications to Luna represent approximately 50 Earth years of continuous construction. The entire human population would have been required to work on this project. 50 years? Admiral Vex couldn't believe it. They've been planning this for 50 years? The moonship continued its approach, and more details became visible. The far side, which had always been hidden from Earth, bristled with weapons systems. Massive gun batteries stretched across continents. Missile silos dotted the surface like steel flowers. Energy cannons larger than space stations tracked across the void. Weapons analysis, Vex ordered. Growl's readings made no sense until he recalibrated his sensors 3 times. Admiral, the weapons systems on that moon could destroy our entire fleet. The main guns appear to be firing neutron stars as ammunition. Neutron stars? Vex's voice cracked. How do you fire a neutron star? Unknown, Admiral. But the energy signatures are unmistakable. Communication channels across the fleet erupted in confusion and fear. Species that had never shown emotion before were broadcasting panic. The crystalline confederation's harmonious chiming became discordant. The Hive Queen's fighters broke formation for the first time in recorded history. Then, a new voice cut through all the chaos. It was calm, professional, and distinctly human. Allied fleet, this is Captain Sarah Martinez of the Earth Defense Force vessel Luna. Sorry we're late. Traffic was murder getting out of the solar system. The casual tone of the announcement made the impossible sight even more shocking. The human was talking as if flying a moon through space was completely normal. War Marshal Thex was the first to respond. Captain Martinez, what? How? What are we looking at? Our contribution to the defense, Marshal. As promised, 1 ship. Admiral Vex found her voice. That's not a ship. That's Luna. That's Earth's moon. Captain Martinez's laugh carried clearly across the communication channel. Well, it was Earth's moon. Now it's humanity's mobile home, and our contribution to this fight. The Zephyrian Collective tried to process this information. Captain Martinez, our calculations show that moving a celestial body of this size should be impossible with any known technology. Probably, Martinez agreed. Good thing we didn't know it was impossible when we started. Might have stopped us. The moonship moved into position at the center of the Allied fleet. Its gravitational field was so strong that nearby vessels had to adjust their positions to avoid being pulled into unwanted orbits. Admiral Vex's flagship, a massive dreadnought that had seemed imposing just minutes before, now looked like a toy boat floating next to an aircraft carrier. Captain Martinez, the ethereal prime consciousness spoke directly to the human ship. We sense millions of life forms aboard your vessel. That's right, Martinez replied. Luna carries about 10 million people. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, farmers, teachers, children. Pretty much a complete civilization. War Marshal Thex's voice was barely controlled. You brought children to a battle zone? Marshal, we brought our children because this is their universe too. If the Devourers win, there won't be anywhere safe to hide them. So, we decided not to hide. The tactical displays across the fleet updated as Luna's weapon systems came online. Every sensor operator in the Allied fleet watched in amazement as enough firepower to sterilize solar systems powered up on the moon's surface. Fleet Command, Captain Martinez announced. Luna is in position and ready for combat operations. We'll take point. Suggest you all stay behind us. Things are going to get interesting when the Devourers arrive. Admiral Vex looked at her tactical display, where Luna appeared as a massive dot surrounded by thousands of smaller Allied vessels. For the first time since the emergency session, she felt something like hope. Captain Martinez, she transmitted, I owe you an apology. We thought humans were being careless or cowardly. No apology needed, Admiral. A lot of people misunderstand humans. We don't send our military to fight for our children. Martinez's voice carried a note of steel that every warrior in the fleet recognized. We bring our children with us and fight as a family. The ethereal prime consciousness spoke one final time before the fleet settled into battle positions. We understand now, humans. You did not send 1 ship because it was all you could spare. You sent 1 ship because it was all you needed. Captain Martinez's response echoed across the fleet, carried by communication systems to every ship and every species. That's right. Prime, when humanity goes to war, we don't send our army. We bring our world. In the distance, sensors detected the first signs of the approaching Devourer swarm. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. But for the first time, the defenders outnumbered the threat. Not in ships, but in sheer, impossible, magnificent scale. The fleet hung in space around Luna, thousands of alien vessels dwarfed by the impossible sight of a weaponized moon. In the hours before the Devourers arrived, Captain Martinez had agreed to explain how humanity had accomplished the unthinkable. Admiral Vex sat in her command chair, listening through the communication system as Martinez told a story that challenged everything she thought she knew about humans. It started 53 years ago, Martinez began. Long before we met any of you. Before we even had faster-than-light travel. Our deep space telescopes detected something in the void between galaxies, something massive and hungry, moving toward us. War Marshal Thex interrupted. You knew about the Devourers before anyone else? We didn't know what they were, Martinez explained. We just knew that something was consuming entire galaxies, and it was heading in our direction. Our scientists calculated we had maybe 100 years before it reached us. The ethereal prime consciousness added its psychic voice to the conversation. But you only contacted our galaxy 5 years ago. Why did you wait so long? Martinez was quiet for a moment before answering. Because we had work to do. While your species developed faster than light travel and energy weapons and artificial intelligence, humans were learning something different. We were learning how to move worlds. Through the communication system, Martinez shared files and images that showed the incredible scope of the Luna project. The alien commanders watched in stunned silence as 50 years of human effort unfolded before them. The first images showed Earth's moon as it had been, a dead, airless rock marked by billions of years of meteor impacts. Then the construction began. We started small, Martinez explained. Mining operations to hollow out the interior. We needed space for the engines, the power plants, the weapon systems. But mostly, we needed space for people. Admiral Vex studied the construction images. This must have required your entire global economy. It did. Every nation on Earth contributed. Every human alive worked on the project in some way. We turned our entire civilization into a construction effort. The images showed massive boring machines digging tunnels through solid rock. Generation ships brought materials from the asteroid belt. Millions of humans lived and worked in the growing network of tunnels and chambers inside Luna. Commander Zilks of the Zephyrian Collective analyzed the construction data. The engineering challenges should have been impossible. How did you solve the structural problems? We didn't solve them, Martinez admitted. We built around them. Luna isn't a perfect ship. It's a compromise between what we wanted and what we could actually build. But it works. War Marshal Thex watched the images of human families living inside the moon, children playing in vast underground parks, entire cities built in hollowed-out caverns. This isn't just a weapon. You built a world inside your world. That was always the plan, Martinez said. If the Devourers consumed Earth, Luna would carry our civilization to safety. If we had to fight them, Luna would be our fortress. Either way, humanity would survive. The Bloom World representative spoke in their musical voice. But why didn't you tell us what you were doing? We could have helped. Martinez's laugh was bitter. Could you? When we first made contact with the Galactic Council, we told them about the approaching threat. Remember what happened? Admiral Vex did remember. The human warnings about extragalactic dangers had been dismissed as paranoid fantasies. Most council species had assumed that humans were suffering from some kind of collective delusion. Your council told us we were imagining things, Martinez continued. You said that nothing could threaten an entire galaxy. You said we were primitives who didn't understand the scale of space. The ethereal prime consciousness felt shame for the first time in centuries. We underestimated the threat and your response to it, so we kept working. Every day, for 50 years, millions of humans dug deeper into Luna. We built engines the size of continents. We created power plants that could fuel small suns. We designed weapons that could crack planets. The images showed the final stages of construction, the massive engines being installed on Luna's far side, weapons systems that stretched across entire continents. defensive systems that turned the moon's interior into a maze of fortified positions. The hardest part wasn't the engineering, Martinez said quietly. It was the choice. We had to decide whether to tell our children the truth about what we were building, and why. War Marshal Thex leaned forward in his command chair. What did you decide? We told them everything. Every human child grows up knowing that their home might have to become a weapon. Every human adult lives knowing that their world might have to fight for the galaxy's survival. Rebended, the alien commanders tried to understand what that meant. Most of their species kept military and civilian populations separate. The idea of an entire civilization preparing for war was foreign to them. You turned your entire population into soldiers, Admiral Vex said. No, Martinez corrected. We turned our entire population into protectors. There's a difference. Soldiers fight because they're ordered to. Protectors fight because they choose to. Commander Zilks processed this information through her logical systems. This level of preparation suggests that humans view warfare differently than other species. We do, Martinez agreed. When the Cathara go to war, they send their warriors. When the Zephyrians fight, they send their machines. When humans face extinction, we send everyone. The communication channel fell silent as the alien commanders absorbed what they had learned. Humans hadn't just built a weapon. They had reshaped their entire civilization around the possibility that they might need to fight for the universe itself. There's something else you need to understand, Martinez added. Luna isn't just our contribution to this battle. If the Devourers break through our defenses, if they defeat the combined fleet, Luna will continue fighting alone. Alone? War Marshal. Thex couldn't hide his disbelief. Against the entire Devourer swarm? For as long as we can. We've already evacuated as many humans as possible from Earth to Luna. If we lose here, Luna will retreat and keep fighting. We'll hit the Devourers at every system, every planet they try to consume. We'll make them pay for every world they take. Admiral Vex understood now why the Ethereal had sensed such determination in Ambassador Chen during the council meeting. You're not just fighting to win, you're fighting to make sure the Devourers regret ever coming to this galaxy. That's right, Admiral. Human children deserve to inherit a universe where monsters fear to hunt. If we can't give them that by winning quickly, we'll give it to them by making the monsters afraid. The ethereal prime consciousness reached out with its psychic abilities, touching the minds aboard Luna. What it found there shocked it to its core. Not just determination, but joy. Not just courage, but love. 10 million humans living inside a weaponized moon, and they were genuinely happy to be there. We sense something remarkable, the Ethereal reported. Your people are not afraid. They are eager. Martinez's voice carried a smile. Prime, humans have spent 50 years building Luna together. 3 generations of our people have lived inside this moon, working toward this moment. We're not afraid of the Devourers. We've been waiting for them. In the distance, sensors detected the first approaching Devourer scouts. The enemy was almost in range. Soon, the talking would end, and the fighting would begin. But the alien commanders of the fleet now understood something crucial about their human allies. They weren't fighting alongside a military force. They were fighting alongside an entire civilization that had chosen to turn itself into a weapon, and that weapon was ready to fire. They came out of the dark between stars like a plague of metal and flesh. The Devourer swarm stretched across space in a writhing mass of biomechanical nightmares that hurt to look at directly. Ships the size of cities moved alongside creatures that had once been planets, now twisted into weapons of consumption and death. Admiral Vex watched her tactical display as the enemy fleet materialized at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. The numbers were worse than their worst projections. Where intelligence had predicted thousands of Devourer vessels, there were tens of thousands. Where they had expected large ships, they found mobile structures that defied classification as either vessel or creature. Fleet status report, Vex commanded, though her voice was tight with controlled fear. All ships report ready for battle, Lieutenant Graal responded. 4,000, 612 Allied vessels in defensive formation around Luna. On the main display, the defensive fleet looked impressive until the scale shifted to show the approaching enemy. The Devourers outnumbered them 10-1, and their largest constructs were bigger than anything in the Allied fleet except Luna itself. War Marshal Thex's voice came across fleet communications. All vessels. This is War Marshal Thex. We fight for our children, our worlds, and our future. Today we teach these monsters why they should have stayed in the dark between galaxies. The battle began with long-range fire from both sides. The Allied fleet opened up with everything they had. Kithara plasma cannons, Zephyrian particle beams, crystalline energy weapons that could cut through mountains. The space between the fleets lit up with streams of deadly light, but the Devourers responded with weapons that seemed to violate the laws of physics. They fired streams of dark energy that absorbed light itself. They launched creatures that swam through the vacuum of space as if it were water. They sent out waves of some kind of corrupting force that tried to turn Allied ships against each other. Enemy weapons are adapting to our attacks, reported Commander Zilks from the Zephyrian flagship. Each time we hit them, they become more resistant to that type of damage. Admiral Vex watched in horror as the Devourers proved why they had consumed entire galaxies. Every tactic the Allied fleet tried, the enemy countered. Every weapon they used, the Devourers learned to resist. Within an hour, it became clear that conventional warfare would not be enough. The Allied fleet began to fall back, their formations breaking under the relentless advance of biomechanical horrors. The Hive Queen's fighters, despite their perfect coordination, were being consumed faster than they could be replaced. The Molten World battle fortresses, despite their heavy armor, were being cracked open like nuts. Luna. This is Admiral Vex, she transmitted desperately. We need your help. Our weapons aren't effective enough. Captain Martinez's voice was calm, despite the chaos around them. Understood, Admiral. Luna is moving to engage. What happened next redefined everyone's understanding of naval warfare. Luna didn't accelerate gradually like a normal ship. It simply started moving, its continental engines pushing the entire moon forward, with enough force to create gravitational waves that nearby ships could feel. The first Devourer constructs to encounter Luna tried their standard consumption tactics. Biomechanical tendrils the size of skyscrapers shot out from their vessels, designed to burrow into enemy hulls and begin the process of converting matter into Devourer biomass. Instead of piercing Luna's surface, the tendrils found themselves trying to drill through solid rock that had been reinforced for 50 years specifically to resist this exact attack. The Devourers had evolved to consume ships and space stations. They had never encountered a weapon that was literally made of moon. All fleet vessels, clear the combat zone, Martinez announced. Luna is engaging close combat protocols. The moonship plowed directly into the center of the Devourer formation. Luna's mass was so enormous that Devourer vessels simply bounced off its surface or were crushed against its weapons installations. The biomechanical creatures that tried to grapple with Luna found themselves trying to wrestle with a celestial body. But the real surprise came when the Devourers tried their ultimate tactic, landing on Luna's surface to begin consuming it from within. This was how they had defeated every previous resistance, by turning the enemy's own weapons against them. Thousands of Devourer boarding pods struck Luna's surface and immediately began burrowing downward. The alien fleet watched in dismay, thinking this would be the beginning of Luna's corruption and defeat. Instead, hidden weapon systems across Luna's surface came to life. The moon's interior, hollowed out and reinforced over 5 decades, became a trap 50 years in the making. Every tunnel, every chamber, every corridor had been designed as both home and fortress. Boarding parties detected, Martinez announced calmly. Activating internal defense systems, what followed was unlike any battle ever fought. The Devourers found themselves inside a world that had been preparing for their arrival for half a century. Automated defense systems engaged them in the tunnels. Human defenders, who had lived their entire lives training for this moment, met them in the caverns. Children who had grown up playing war games in Luna's corridors now fought real monsters in the same tunnels they knew better than their own names. The ethereal prime consciousness, monitoring the battle through psychic links, was amazed by what it sensed. The humans inside Luna are not fighting like soldiers. They are fighting like family defending their home. On Luna's surface, massive weapon systems that had been disguised as natural lunar features came online. Crater rims lifted up to reveal gun emplacements the size of cities. What had looked like ancient impact scars opened to reveal missile silos that could launch planet killers. Admiral Vex watched her tactical display as Luna's true firepower was revealed. By all the stars, they've turned their entire moon into a weapons platform. The Devourers, who had never encountered resistance on this scale, began to falter. Their biomechanical ships, designed for efficiency and adaptation, couldn't cope with Luna's brute force approach. When a moon rams your ship at significant fractions of light speed, adaptation becomes irrelevant. More importantly, the Devourer creatures that had boarded Luna weren't winning their battles inside the moon. They were losing. Badly. Every tunnel they entered became a killing ground. Every chamber they reached was another trap. The humans had spent 50 years learning how to fight inside their own home, and they were very, very good at it. Luna, what's your internal status? Admiral Vex asked. Boarding parties are being eliminated systematically, Martinez reported. These things are used to fighting on ships and space stations. They don't know how to fight inside a world that's been designed to kill them. The battle reached its climax when the largest Devourer construct, a thing the size of a small planet that had once been the heart of an entire star system, moved to engage Luna directly. The two objects collided in an impact that could be seen from the next star system over. But where the Devourer expected to begin consuming Luna, it instead found itself being consumed. Luna's weapons, powered by energy systems built into a moon-sized structure, began systematically dismantling the Devourer construct piece by piece. The moment of victory came when Captain Martinez activated Luna's ultimate weapon, the gravity lance. Hidden in Luna's core was a device that could focus the moon's own gravitational field into a beam of destructive force. The gravity lance fired once. The beam passed through the center of the Devourer fleet and simply deleted everything in its path from existence. Ships, creatures, biomechanical constructs, all of them ceased to exist as organized matter. The surviving Devourers, faced with a weapon they couldn't understand or adapt to, did something they had never done before in their existence. They fled. As the enemy retreated into the dark between galaxies, Admiral Vex found herself looking at Luna with new respect and more than a little fear. The humans had just defeated a threat that had consumed entire galaxies, and they had done it by turning their moon into a weapon. Captain Martinez, she transmitted, on behalf of the Allied fleet, I want to thank you. We underestimated both the threat and humanity's response to it. Martinez's reply came with a warm laugh. Admiral, you didn't underestimate humanity. You just didn't understand us. When humans are threatened, we don't send our army to fight for our children. We bring our children with us and fight as a family. War Marshal Thex added his voice to the communication. I have fought in many battles, Captain, but I have never seen anything like this. Your people didn't just win this fight. You made it look easy. Marshal, when you spend 50 years preparing for one specific fight, it should look easy. We didn't send a ship to this battle. We brought our home. And humans will always defend their home. The ethereal prime consciousness spoke last, its psychic voice carrying a note of wonder. We understand now why Ambassador Chen was so confident. Humans didn't just build a weapon. You built a new kind of warfare. As the Allied fleet began the long journey home, every species carried with them a new understanding of their human allies. They had witnessed what happened when an entire civilization decided to turn itself into a weapon. They had seen what humans could accomplish when they fought not as soldiers, but as a family. And in the dark spaces between galaxies, things that had never known fear began to understand why they should be afraid of a small blue world whose people had weaponized their moon and called it home.